Hi, everybody. This is Todd Creager, and today I'm going to be answering some common questions about attachment styles and infidelity. There is definitely a connection between how we attach to each other or not, how we attach to our parents growing up or not, the quality of the attachment, and whether we cheat or not. Um, I'm not saying it's the only factor of infidelity, but one of the things that I know is overlooked is our attachment style. It also plays a part in how the betrayed person heals from infidelity and how the betrayer can heal from the infidelity, from the discovery, from being found out. So that's what I want to talk to you about. So, one question that I basically get is something to the effect of how did my childhood experiences shape my relationship patterns? Okay, so there are patterns in relationships that we have that didn't come out of a vacuum. It can happen because of how we learned to deal with our emotions as a child. So, um, if a person, for example, and I'll get into the names of these attachment styles later in a little while, but if a person has the experience that I come from a family where my feelings are heard, I learned to trust that it's okay to be vulnerable. And if I came from a family basically where I learned that feelings are not okay to be dealt with, that we got to achieve only, or we got to be tough only, and got to be stoic. I might grow up in my intimate relationships and have a very difficult time in being vulnerable. It might not even be part of what I even think about. Getting close, letting you get close to me and me getting close to you. Um, if I come from a family where there's a lot of abandonment issues, I might have a lot of anxiety and might be hypervigilant and always kind of bracing myself for when are you going to leave me? So there's most definitely our childhood experiences will affect our relationship patterns. For example, what I just said, if a person comes from a family where there's been some abandonment, you might be very hypervigilant, maybe even suffocating to your partner because you feel like you got to be in control. So, always trying to prevent that catastrophe that this part of you learned when you were younger that I can be abandoned. So, you end up doing everything you can to not be abandoned, including sometimes suffocating your spouse, making it where the person feels like they can't breathe, like they can't do anything. So, communication patterns are affected by how we grow up. If we saw our parents role model good communication, which actually is pretty rare, then there's a better chance we'll be able to communicate well with our partner. If we saw parents that fought a lot, then emotions become um, tools of venting rather than sharing. Venting is when you just kind of throw up on the person with your emotions as opposed to inform the other person in a way that lets them receive them. So I could go on and on about that. But most definitely, we need to look, no matter what our patterns are, the ones that work and the ones that don't work, we want to look at our childhood experiences and see how they may have helped shape our patterns in our adulthood. Okay, another question. Question number two. What's the difference between anxious and avoidant attachment? Okay, let me get into actually the different attachment styles. Actually, the secure attachment, which wasn't listed in the question, is when a person is able to soothe themselves, but also let others soothe them. These are people that typically came from families where their parents, more times than not, tuned into them. They um, they were able to respond to the child based on what the child was experiencing, as opposed to whatever the stress level was of the parent. The more the parent is able to regulate their own emotions, the more they're able to be tuning in contingently, meaning based on what the child is really feeling. So, for example, if a life can be challenging, life can have their stresses. If a parent is able to manage their stresses well enough, and suddenly their child has had a bad dream, you don't just say, "Oh, just leave me alone. I'm tired." You go, "Tell me about it. You're really scared? Come here. Let me hear about it. Let me hear about that." And to hold them, to soothe them, to hug them, to let them know that you are not making them wrong for their experiences. This child, if they get enough of those kinds of experiences, even good, happy experiences. Let's say the child is all excited about something that they are watching on TV. They love the show, and you're going like, "No, that's stupid." Okay, coming from your adult mind, uh, it's not attunement. It's not tuning in to the child. The child's like, "Oh, you really like that?" No, I might be going, "I don't like it," but my child likes it. Obviously, I'm not talking about something that's truly a toxic program that they're watching. It might be just something that's not your cup of tea, but your child's into it. Or a common thing is, let's say you're a father that has a son who's not into sports like you were. They're into a dance, or they're into, which is a sport actually, but they're not into football. They're into dance, or they're into music or art, or something that you don't necessarily relate to. Are you tuning in? Are you validating that person? Or you try to judge that person because it's not what you like, right? So when a person comes from a family where they really feel like who they are is being validated, like what they're experiencing is being seen as okay and real, they feel real. They feel like they matter. That is the definition of a secure attachment. And this child grows up as an adult who's going to be capable of soothing themselves, but also be vulnerable enough to let others soothe them. The anxious attachment style, on the other hand, is one where you might have very inconsistent parenting. The parent is there sometimes, not there other times. Sometimes maybe they're drinking a lot, and when they're sober, they're present, but when they're drinking, they're not. And so this child, when the parent goes away, they go away. It's not like a quick return. They're just gone for hours or days or whatever. And so it creates a lot of anxiety. And this child can grow up into an adult that if, let's say, you're late for dinner for 15 minutes, that it feels like the end of the world, like you're never coming back. And it might be partly due to coming from parenting like that inconsistent pairing that you're here sometimes, but you're not there other times. And separation means something really serious. So there's a lot of anxiety about it. These people tend to smother. These people tend to, if you're 15 minutes late, they've blown up your phone with 30 texts. Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Okay. And now, of course, in all these, you got to put things into context. I'm dealing a lot with infidelity, of course. When people discover their partner has cheated on them, of course, that's going to evoke an anxious attachment. They are going to need reassurance. I'm talking about predisposing factors, where a person comes into the relationship with an anxious attachment style. They might tend to be really not good at regulating themselves. And they're all constantly looking to you to make them feel safe, constantly. No capacity or very little capacity for self-regulation. In the avoidance attachment style, which just tells you that's secure, anxious, avoidant. Those are the three I'm going over. In the avoidant attachment style, you have a person who grew up in a family where they basically were told, when it comes to emotions and pain, you're on your own, kiddo. You know, I'm not here to bail you out. I'm not here to listen, and it's not rewarding to share. These children learn to just deal with their pain on their own, become find ways to regulate themselves on their own, and they grow up into adults that have a real hard time being vulnerable. Oftentimes, um, they're hard to get to know, and um, even though the anxious attachment style could lead to acting out outside the marriage, infidelity or whatever, because someone's soothing them, the avoidant attachment style oftentimes more easily can break the sacred bond because they don't experience the depth and the closeness with their partner because the metaphor I use, their jaws are wired shut. And so even if the partner wants to feed them, they can't get any food in there. Well, food of the heart, of feeling the love and the appreciation for the other person and allowing you to impact me doesn't happen very much with these avoidant attachment style people. So they oftentimes are experiencing a very superficial relationship. Now, I've had ones where one partner didn't experience it that way at all. They experienced deep feelings and deep love, but the other person, being avoidant, really experienced more of a superficial level, and they may be more likely, more easily go outside the relationship. Um, so with infidelity, you have a person who typically is not self-soothing. That's the anxious attachment. Or is not getting too close. That's the avoidant attachment. And both can lead to a higher chance, for the reasons I was given, to cheat. Okay. The person who's anxious will just be soothed by somebody else because sometimes your partner's preoccupied and might not be there for you. And if you have this anxious attachment, you might find someone that will. And it soothes you because you can't soothe yourself very well. You're the avoidant attachment style, again, like I said, you just don't get that close. And so it's just easier to sabotage, you know, living on the surface. So, likewise, a person who's um, anxious attachment style, who on top of it discovers infidelity, can really exacerbate that anxious attachment style for obvious reasons. Sometimes the person who's an avoidant attachment style, who's the victim of betrayal, will either give up even more, say, and become hopeless, or it might be the time, and I'm not saying this is good, it's not a good thing, but where they suddenly don't seem like an avoidance right now. They're more vulnerable, they're more emotional, they've been so hurt. The person who's the one who did the betrayal, if they have an avoidance style, they might still want you to just get over it. They don't want to deal with feelings. They don't want to deal with their own shame. They just want to keep everything in a box. It's harder to do that if they have the anxious attachment style and they've been caught cheating. Of course, their anxiety might go through the roof because now it's like, you're going to leave me for sure. I've done something really bad. And, I've had that with a couple I see right now where um, he had the anxious attachment. He has an anxious attachment style, but then he did cheat. And he has been full of anxiety and panic now that his partner will leave. It's complicated. I don't want to get into all the dynamics, but um, obviously he needed some soothing. He felt anxious, and now he's put himself in a place in the marriage where he's even more anxious. The third question is, how do I recognize when my younger parts are being triggered? Now, there's information behind that question. I look at people as an assemblage of their parts. That we're not just one, there's many parts to us. So we have this mature adult part, but we have younger parts, especially parts that we haven't explored, that could oftentimes hijack our system. And these younger parts have a mind of their own. That's why when people um, uh, cheat, a lot of times the way you have to look at it is not all of them cheated. Okay, I'm not saying they didn't cheat; they cheated, but there was a part of them that was cheating. Probably another part is going, "What the heck am I doing?" But that part, we got to get curious about that part. So a lot of time, so one of the ways I have people recognize when the younger parts are being triggered, and I'm actually talking now from the person who does the betrayal. I'll talk about the betrayed person in a minute. is you got to become aware. You got to decide, I'm going to take a look at myself. I'm not going to just act out my reflexes. I'm going to become aware. I'm beginning to get curious. Wow, I feel like going outside my marriage. What's going on? What what part of me is being activated? So you got to ask those questions. How old do I feel? How old does this part feel that wants to go out there? Do I feel my age? Let's say my age is 45. Do I feel 45? Or do I feel a little bit more like 16 or 17? What's that about? I had one person that was successful at that. He's in a relationship. They didn't come to me for infidelity, but I want to give you the other side of it. He found himself attracted to not 16, 17-year-olds, but 20-year-olds. Okay. And he was 45. So what is this? Why am I suddenly? And he recognized that there was a part of him that never felt popular in college, high school or college. And he never felt like he could get the girl. And he became successful and more self-assured. And he noticed there was this 20-year-old part of him that wanted to prove that he could do it. And he was very aware of it, and he never acted on it. He was married, so he never acted on it. But we talked about it. It's like, yeah, this is part of me that wanted to, you know, act on it, but I realized where that was coming from. There was this younger part of me that always felt like I had to prove myself. I never could be as good. I felt inferior to the other guys. So that's just a pretty benign example of parts. These parts are real. And I'm not giving excuses to people that act out. Actually, I think that's terrible. They're not aware. They're letting these younger parts run the show. So they have to become more aware. That's the key. It's not that they're bad. They're unaware. They're unconscious. This 45-year-old man he was able to become aware of this part and not do something stupid. So one of the things you want to do is ask yourself, how old do I feel? I do this a lot with people that are betrayed as well. Of course you're going to get triggered. Of course. Your partner cheated on you. You might get triggered by when you visit the same city that the person was in. You might get triggered when you see some scene on TV and the person is the same nationality as the affair partner. It could be anything. That's normal. But you also want to become aware of, is there also a younger part of me being triggered? And how you do that is you ask, how old do I feel? Do I feel like, I'm going to use the age 45. Do I feel like the 45-year-old that got betrayed? Because that definitely could be true. But is it also, there's this 6-year-old girl that was let down by daddy, and I felt let down again. How old do I feel? It's a connecting. You're connecting, trying to tune in. You got to go inside. Wow, yeah, there's a little girl part. Sometimes you can't do this on your own. You might need a therapist to help you with that. But I find it very, very valuable to be aware of those younger parts. The part that maybe that had an insecure attachment, whether it was an avoidant attachment or an anxious attachment with a parent. Okay, you want to be able to take a look at that. All right. Next question. Can my attachment style change with awareness and work? Absolutely. This has been shown neurobiologically as well as psychologically. That's literally, there's a part of the brain, the amygdala, where these neurons wire together. They fire together, eventually wire together. And you could have the template for an insecure attachment, whether it's avoidant or anxious um, or secure. Okay. And when you start to practice self-soothing, if you're not good at that, if you have more of the anxious attachment style, when you practice being more vulnerable and allowing your partner to be there for you, if you have the avoidant attachment style, even post-infidelity, I see this all the time with couples where they're trying to heal from infidelity and they begin to try to develop what we call an earned secure attachment. they over time start to feel more connected, more deeply connected, and the neurons can literally change in an enriched environment like that. When you're enriching your relationship environment, you're enriching your brain environment. So there's no question that your attachment style can change with awareness and work. It goes the other way too. When people are unconscious or when they're triggered by trauma, they can go from secure to more insecure. But likewise, you could go from insecure to more secure. And don't doubt that for a second. Now, to do that in your relationship, you need both people on board. Otherwise, if only one's on board, it gets really impossible to be able to feel, to experience that attachment style with that partner. You'd have to leave and create a new relationship with somebody else. But the way I look at it is I try to help couples, even post infidelity, to create a new relationship with each other. One where their attachment styles can change from insecure to secure. And that's why we have the term earned secure attachment, because couples have to earn it. Even couples who came from relatively healthy families still got to earn that secure attachment as a couple. None of us are really great at both soothing ourselves and allowing others to soothe us, and to do that, efficiently. It takes some work and some commitment. The last question, which I thought was an interesting one, was how do my partner's attachment wounds interact with mine? Now, obviously, that's a big question. That's as unique as every couple. But I have my attachment wounds. Let's say a person is avoidant because their attachment wounds is you never were tuned into me. I had to be on my own. And my partner had inconsistent parenting. So they had the anxious attachment style. We actually call that a biphasic couple, where one is more avoidant and the other is more anxious in terms of their insecure attachment styles. And so the more I'm avoidant, the more it triggers your anxiety. The more it triggers your anxiety, the more you're looking for me to soothe your anxiety, the more I feel suffocated and I do more avoidance, and it could be a downward spiral. I have never, I can't recall a couple where they both had anxious attachment styles. I've had, I've had those where they had avoidant attachment styles, and they're both like, and so independent, the two ships passing through the night. And the therapy there is really about helping them get motivated to explore this new phenomena of letting the other be there for you. And it's a very interesting dynamic versus the biphasic couple, where one is pursuing and the other is distancing. There's that pattern that happens. So our partner's attachment styles always interact with our own attachment styles, and typically, like I said, it can make it worse. The key is awareness. The key is awareness. I think of me, my own relationship. In the beginning, my wife had some abandonment stuff. I had a mom who I loved and my dad who I loved, but as a couple, my mom was very critical of my dad. So if I didn't come through for my wife in some ways, I think her abandonment issues came up and she would intensely complain. And then it would evoke my anxiety because you're complaining, uh-oh, I don't want to be my dad. And so I would invalidate her more, which made her feel more abandoned, right? So these are, my attachment style was basically if I'm, if I please you, I'm loved. So there was a little bit of, I don't know what you want to call that. She definitely had more of the anxious attachment style. Maybe we both did. Maybe that is an example of two people having somewhat of an anxious attachment style. So there, I just disproves my own statement, even in my own marriage. I don't know. I have to look at that. Um, I think that, what's a little challenging is we're not just black and white, right? So I think I had kind of a secure slash avoidant. Now that I'm thinking about it, I was pretty much on my own. What was I thinking? Now that I'm thinking about it, I think I was more like I could handle this and didn't let a whole lot out. I've changed. That I'm a good example of someone who could really change their attachment style. I really am much more vulnerable and let my wife in and other people in. That's for sure. So I don't know where I was thinking I had more of an anxious attachment style. Not when I was married. Not when I first got married. Definitely more of avoidant, and she was probably more of the anxious. And then of course the avoidant, it was like, just come on, get over it, get over it, get over it. I don't want to deal with this. And I'm a therapist, but in my own marriage, that's what I did. Anyway, so we can definitely destabilize the relationship. And when it is destabilized, when we're feeling chaos, I'm telling you, you want to look for those parts, those younger parts. You want to try to understand what is our attachment styles and what younger parts are being triggered. My example, the part that felt I wasn't good enough, and her part that felt that she was not safe, right? And you come together and it could just blow up. Awareness. Awareness is the beginning. Awareness and doing the work of having an insecure attachment. So I just wanted to go over those 5 questions. I think they're good questions. They're pretty universal. I think listening to this, you probably can relate to most of them, if not all of them. So thank you for listening. This is Todd Creager, making the world safe for love.